Somewhere in the mountains of southern China, there is a woman who can write in an alphabet that no man was ever meant to read. She learned it from her mother, who learned it from hers, a chain of hands passing a secret script down through 1,000 years of silence. Today, fewer than 100 people on Earth can still read it fluently. When the last of them forgets, a language that belonged only to women will disappear from the world entirely. Deep in the province of Guizhou, more than 100 people are waking up this morning inside a cave, not camping, living. There is a basketball court in there, and there used to be a school, until the government decided that a country like China should not have citizens who live in caves, and closed it. The families refused to leave. On a river in the karst mountains near Guilin, an old man is standing on a narrow bamboo raft in the dark before dawn, sending trained birds down into the black water to catch his fish. He is somewhere between 70 and 80 years old. Every man who still knows how to do this is somewhere between 70 and 80 years old. There will not be another generation. And high in the mountains of Yunnan, there are only about 60 men left alive who can read the last living picture writing on Earth, a script of over 1,000 painted symbols. Most of them are past 70. When they die, humanity loses the final language that is still drawn rather than spelled. These are not tourist attractions. This is the China that nobody shows you, the country that exists above the skylines and beyond the high-speed rail, in the mountains and the river valleys and the terraced hillsides. And almost every one of these worlds is disappearing. Today we are counting down 12 of them, from number 12 all the way to number 1. And number 1 is that women's script in the South, the one that dies a little more with every funeral. Before we start, drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from right now. We want to see how far this reaches. Number 12, Hakka, Tulou. Fujian. In the mountains of Fujian stand some of the strangest homes in the world. The tulou of the Hakka people, enormous fortified roundhouses of rammed earth, some large enough to shelter hundreds of people from a single extended clan behind walls of packed dirt several feet thick. From above, they look like great rings dropped into the green hills. And during the Cold War, they were reportedly mistaken by foreign analysts studying satellite images for missile silos. The Hakka built them from the 11th century onward. Migrants pushed south by invasion, marginalized into the mountains, and forced to defend themselves against bandits and wild animals by turning their homes into fortresses. A single tulou was a whole village folded into one building, with a well, a granary, an ancestral hall, and defensible walls, everyone inside bound by blood. In 2008, UNESCO listed 46 of them as World Heritage Sites, and those chosen few are now protected and restored. But the 46 are a fraction. There are an estimated 3,000 tulou across the region, and thousands of them stand vacant, unattended, quietly falling apart. The reason is the same reason repeated all across these mountains. The young people have left for the cities and their opportunities. Nobody wants to live in a rammed earth ring anymore, sharing a courtyard with 100 relatives. The restoration expert who put it most simply said only this: young people don't live in tulou now. Earth walls that stood for centuries need constant care from the people inside, and when the people leave, the rain does what enemies never could. Number 11. Longhorn Miao, Suojia, Guizhou. In the mountains of western Guizhou lives a community of around 5,000 people spread across just 12 villages. The Longhorn Miao. Their name comes from one of the most extraordinary headdresses on Earth. The women wind an enormous mass of wool, linen, and human hair around a pair of horns or a wooden frame, securing the whole structure with a long white ribbon, until it sits on the head like a great dark set of wings, sometimes wider than the wearer's own shoulders. But it is whose hair it is that stops you. The hair wound into these headdresses is the hair of their ancestors. It is collected and saved across generations. The hair of grandmothers and great-grandmothers, kept and added to and passed down, so that a young woman at a festival is quite literally wearing the physical remains of the women she descends from. The tradition comes from a wish to honor the dead beyond death, to keep their image present among the living, to carry them forward in the most personal material a person can leave behind. You can see these headdresses in their full glory at the annual flower festival, the Tiao Huajie, when the women perform in them. But the phrase that follows the longhorn Miao everywhere now is dying tradition. In the past, the headdresses were part of ordinary life. Today, they mostly come out for festivals, or when visitors arrive with cameras. A culture that once wore its ancestors every day now unpacks them for special occasions, which is the quiet first stage of forgetting. Number 10. Huangluo Red Yao, Longhair Village, Guangxi. Huangluo, deep in the mountains of Longsheng County in Guangxi, is known by a title certified by Guinness World Records, the Longhair Village. It is home to the Red Yao, and here the women grow their hair to extraordinary lengths. Among just over 120 women, more than 80 have hair longer than 1.4 meters, and the longest measured has reached 2.1 meters. Hair that pools on the ground when it is unbound. This is not vanity, it is belief woven tightly into the life of the community. For the Red Yao, long hair means long life and prosperity, and a woman cuts her hair only twice in her entire existence, once as an infant at 100 days old, and once again at her coming-of-age ceremony at 18. That single cutting is kept, and later worn together with her living hair as part of an elaborate headdress, the way a woman wears it, loose, wound up, or coiled into a bun, silently announces to the whole village whether she is unmarried, married, or a mother. Her hair is her biography, written on her own head. The recipes for the rice water washes that keep this hair black and strong into old age were, for generations, closely guarded secrets taught only from mother to daughter. Now the village survives largely on tourists who come to watch the women wash and comb their hair by the river. And that is precisely the pressure. When an intimate ritual becomes a daily performance, the reasons behind it can thin out even as the image is preserved. The hair still falls to the floor. The question is whether the meaning that made it sacred will still be there in the granddaughters, or whether only the spectacle will remain. Number 9. Cormorant fishermen, Li River, Guangxi. Along the Li River near Guilin, in the karst country of Guangxi, there is a way of fishing that is older than 1,000 years and has almost no time left. The cormorant fishermen work from slender bamboo rafts, often before dawn, using not nets or rods, but trained birds. A cormorant is a superb diver, and the fisherman ties a loose cord at the base of its throat, tight enough that the bird cannot swallow the larger fish it catches, loose enough to let it breathe and feed on the small ones. The bird dives, seizes a fish, surfaces, and the fisherman lifts it back to the raft to retrieve the catch. It is a partnership between a man and a wild animal, refined over 1,000 years and passed down through at least 5 generations in some families. Today it is almost entirely gone. Industrial fishing, motorboats, and falling fish populations made the old way economically pointless decades ago. The men who still practice it are, almost without exception, between 70 and 80 years old. Their children were not interested. The rhythm of standing on a raft in the cold dark, reading a bird's body for the flick that means it has caught something, could not compete with the pull of the cities and the screens. What keeps it alive at all is the very tourism that could not save the fishing itself. Photographers come for the image, the silhouette of an old man and his birds against the mist and the karst peaks at sunrise. and so the elders make a modest living, displaying a craft that no longer feeds them. It is a strange kind of afterlife for a tradition, kept breathing as a photograph after it has died as a livelihood. When these particular old men are gone, the 1,000-year partnership between the fishermen of the Li and their birds will end with them. Number 8. Danba watchtowers. Sichuan. In the high valleys of Danba, in western Sichuan, stone towers rise out of the earth beside the snow peaks. There are around 560 of them scattered through the townships here, which is why the region is called the Kingdom of 1,000 Watchtowers. They belong to the Zhongdong Tibetans, and some of them are believed to be close to 2,000 years old, hand-built from stone, tapering as they climb, some reaching many stories into the mountain air. Nobody fully agrees on why they were built. The Zhongdong themselves tell of ancestors who raised them as fortresses to defend their land and their wealth during centuries of conflict, hiding jewelry and valuables inside the walls. Older beliefs held that the towers were raised to suppress demons, to hold back evil from the villages below. What no one disputes is the skill. These are dry stone structures with no modern engineering, standing on active seismic terrain, and many have survived earthquakes that flattened newer buildings around them. The threat now is quieter than any war. A stone tower requires maintenance, and maintenance requires masons who understand how the ancestors fit the stones, knowledge that lives in fewer and fewer hands each year. Some towers have already fallen. Others lean, cracked and unrepaired, above villages whose young people have moved down the valley or out of the mountains entirely. 2,000 years of standing, and the danger is not an army at the base of the tower. It is the absence of anyone who still knows how to keep it standing. Number 7. Yuanyang Hani Rice Terraces. Yunnan Yuanyang, in the far south of Yunnan, is a mountain that people rebuilt into the sky. For more than 1,000 years, the Hani people, along with the Yi, have carved rice terraces into these slopes, thousands upon thousands of flooded steps, climbing from the valley floor up into the clouds. Some hillsides, holding as many as 3,000 individual terraces, stacked one above the next. In 2013, UNESCO named the Honghe Hani Rice Terraces a World Heritage Site, calling it one of the most complete examples of humans and nature building a landscape together. What makes it extraordinary is that it works without a single pump. The Hani engineered an entire self-sustaining system by hand. Forests are protected at the very top of the mountains because the forests hold the water. That water feeds springs. The springs feed a network of irrigation channels dug and maintained collectively by the villages. And the channels carry water down through terrace after terrace so that the runoff from the highest field becomes the lifeblood of the field below it. Above the terraces sit the villages. Above the villages, the forest. Below everything, the river. It is a machine made of mountain, and it has been running for over 1,000 years. But a system this precise depends completely on human hands. Every channel must be cleared, every terrace wall repaired after every rain, and all of it requires people who know how and who are willing to stay. The young are leaving Yuanyang for wages in the cities, just as they are leaving everywhere else, and terraces that go untended begin to slump and collapse, one wall taking out the one beneath it. 1,000 years of engineering, held together not by concrete, but by the daily decision of farmers to keep climbing the mountain. Number 6. Nakshi Dongba script, Lijiang, Yunnan. In the old town of Lijiang, in Yunnan, painted symbols cover the shop signs and the road signs, pictures of birds, of eyes, of mountains and water. They are not decoration. They are the Nakshi Dongba script, and it is widely called the last living pictographic writing system on Earth, the final language that is still drawn as pictures rather than assembled from letters. It has more than 1,400 characters, and records show it was already in use as far back as the 7th century, during the early Tang dynasty, with some researchers arguing its roots run far deeper still. This was never an everyday alphabet for shopping lists. It was a sacred script, readable only by the Dongba, the shaman priests of the Nakshi, who used it to record rituals that braid together Tibetan Buddhism, Taoist philosophy, and the older animist belief that the natural world is alive and full of spirits. To read Dongba is not just to sound out words, it is to hold the ceremonies, the myths, and the cosmology of an entire people. And that knowledge is now concentrated in a terrifyingly small number of minds. Today, only around 60 Dongba priests can still fully read and write the script, and most of them are over 70 years old. The Nakshi language itself is spoken less by each new generation, and the ancient Nakshi music tradition loses its elder players every year. There are efforts to fight back, younger Dongba going into local schools to teach the characters to children. But when the living memory of an entire pictographic language rests on roughly 60 aging shoulders, every single funeral is a page torn out of a book that was never fully copied. Number 5. Mosuo Matrilineal Society, Lugu Lake. On the border between Yunnan and Sichuan, ringed by mountains, lies Lugu Lake, and on its shores lives one of the last matrilineal societies on the planet. The Mosuo people have organized their world around women for as long as anyone can trace.
We gather here as one family, bound by the hearth. It is this unity that protects us through the seasons.
Children take their mother's name and grow up in her house, surrounded by her siblings. The custom that draws the most attention from the outside world is what is often translated as the walking marriage. In traditional Mosuo life, a man and a woman who care for one another do not marry, do not merge households, and do not share property. He visits her at night and returns to his own mother's home by morning. There is no wedding, no legal contract, no shared surname. If the relationship ends, it simply ends, and any children remain fully within the mother's family, raised by her and her brothers, who take the fathering role for their sister's children rather than their own. For centuries, this worked because it was sealed off, tucked into a lake valley that outsiders rarely reached. That seal is now broken. Roads brought tourism, tourism brought money, and money brought a version of the Mosuo repackaged for visitors, alongside the ordinary pull of the modern world, drawing young people toward the cities and toward conventional marriage.
Is the heart of
Anthropologists who study the Mosuo increasingly describe a culture negotiating its own survival in real time, where a grandmother still rules the house, but her grandchildren carry smartphones. One of the last places on Earth where lineage runs through the mother, quietly deciding whether it will exist in 50 years. Number 4. Basha Miao Gun Village, Kongjiang, Guizhou, Kongjiang County. In Guizhou holds a village that time seems to have refused to touch. Basha is known as the last gun-carrying tribe in China. Around 2,500 Miao people live here, on a remote forested mountainside, and the men openly carry long rifles, something permitted nowhere else in the country. The public security authorities granted them a special exemption on the strict condition that the guns stay within their own mountains and are used only for hunting and ceremony. But the gun is only the most visible part of a way of life that has been passed down. They say, for more than 2,000 years, the Basha worship trees. They believe that human beings are the children of nature and of the forest, that the oldest trees are their ancestors, and when a child is born, a tree is planted. When a person dies, that tree is cut and used to make their coffin, so that a life ends where it began, inside the wood. The clearest window into this world is the coming-of-age ceremony. When a boy reaches 15 or 16, the village gathers. He drinks rice wine, ancient Miao songs are sung, dances are performed, and then the village elder shaves the boy's head, not with a razor, but with a sickle, the same curved blade used to harvest the rice. Only after that blade has passed over his scalp is he handed the rifle his father made for him, the gun that will accompany him for the rest of his life. It is a ritual designed to bind a man to the forest, to the harvest, and to the weapon, all in a single afternoon. And it survives now inside a country moving faster than almost any in history. A 2,000-year-old ceremony performed a short drive from a bullet train. Number 3. Zhongdong Village for the Grand Song. Guizhou Zhaoxing, in the mountains of southeastern Guizhou, is the largest Dong ethnic village in China, and to walk into it is to walk into an architecture of sound. The village is divided into 5 clusters, each one belonging to a major clan, and each cluster has its own drum tower and its own bridge. Not ordinary bridges. These are the famous wind and rain bridges of the Dong, covered wooden structures, built entirely without nails, their beams locked together by interlocking joints alone, roofed and railed, so that travelers can shelter from the weather right in the middle of the crossing. But the real treasure of the Dong is not built from wood. It is sung. The grand song of the Dong people is a form of polyphonic choral singing, performed with no instruments and no conductor, dozens of voices weaving multiple independent melodies at once, imitating the sound of cicadas, of birds, of rivers moving through the hills. In 2009, UNESCO recognized it as intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The Dong had no written language of their own for most of their history, which means these songs were their libraries. Their laws, their love stories, their genealogies, their farming knowledge, all of it was encoded in melody and carried in the memory of singers. That is exactly what makes it fragile. A song that is never written down survives only as long as someone is willing to learn it note for note from an elder. The drum towers still stand and the bridges still carry their crowds. But a tradition where the entire history of a people lives inside the human voice is only ever one uninterested generation away from silence. Number 2. Zhongdong Cave Village, Ziyun County. Guizhou Zhongdong Cave in Ziyun County, Guizhou Province, is often called the last cave village in China, and the name is not a metaphor. An entire community lives inside a single natural cavern in the mountains of the southwest, a space that measures roughly 300 feet across, 160 feet high, and 750 feet deep. 18 families, around 100 people, all of them from the Miao ethnic minority, have built their homes from wood and woven bamboo directly beneath the stone ceiling. There are no full outer walls. The mouth of the cave is the front door for the whole village. The people here are farmers. Their entire rhythm of life is governed by the light and the weather that the cave allows in. And for most of their history, there was no electricity at all. That changed only in the early 2000s, when an American traveler stumbled onto the cave during a hike and was so moved that he funded the building of a school inside it. At its peak, that school, the Zhongdong Hope Primary School, held around 180 children across 6 classes, taught by 8 teachers in dim makeshift classrooms carved out of the cave floor. Then, in 2008, the government ordered the school closed. The official reasoning was blunt. China, they said, is not a society of cave dwellers. The children now walk up to 2 hours each way, every morning and every evening, to reach a school outside the mountain. Officials have offered the families money and modern housing to relocate. Most have refused. They were born under this stone, their parents are buried in this valley, and a house with better wiring is not, to them, worth more than the only world they have ever known. 100 people, living in the dark, holding a line that everyone around them assumes will not hold for another generation. Number 1. Nüshu, the women's script. Jiangyong, Hunan Jiangyong County, in the south of Hunan Province, is the home of something that exists nowhere else on earth. A written language created by women, for women, and kept hidden from men for centuries. It is called Nüshu, and it is believed to be the only script in human history developed and used almost entirely by women. To understand why it exists, you have to understand what it was born into. For generations, girls in this region were denied the education that boys received. They were not taught the standard Chinese characters. They were, in the fullest sense, kept from writing. So they built their own. Nüshu is a delicate, thread-like script of around 500 characters, and where men's calligraphy is square and blocky, this writing is slanted and fine, like embroidery turned into language. It was stitched into cloth, painted onto fans, written into cloth-bound books that were treasured as private possessions. Women used it to record their own autobiographies, to write poetry, and above all, to write their sworn sisters. Deep, lifelong friendships between women who were not related by blood, but bound by something the outside world gave them no other way to express. According to the historical record, a book of Nüshu was often burned or buried with its owner when she died, so that her most private words would travel with her rather than remain behind. The end of this world can be dated almost exactly. On the 20th of September 2004, a woman named Yang Huanyi died at over 90 years old. She was one of the last great natural writers of the script, and scholars mark her death as the beginning of what they call the post-Nüshu era. Today, the Chinese state has listed it as National Intangible Cultural Heritage, and workshops now try to teach it to a new generation. But a script born from exclusion cannot easily survive its own inclusion. Fewer than 100 people can still read and write it with fluency. When they are gone, the sentences these women wrote to one another, in a code their husbands could never crack, will become beautiful, silent shapes that no one alive can hear. That is why it is number one. Almost everything else on this list is a place, a building, a craft. This is a voice, and it is the closest to gone. China has some of the tallest towers and the fastest trains and the biggest cities the world has ever built. That is the China most people picture. But above the skylines and beyond the last rail line, there is another country, one that most of the world will never see. Great earthen rings emptying out one migration at a time. Women wearing the hair of their ancestors, hair that falls to the floor and tells a life story. An old man and his birds against the dawn. Towers of stone that outlived every war, but may not outlive our indifference. A mountain rebuilt into the sky by hand, watered without a single pump. 60 old men holding the last language still drawn as pictures. A society where the grandmother rules and the lineage runs through the mother. Men who receive a rifle after a sickle shaves their head. Voices weaving 1,000 years of history with no instrument but their own breath. 100 people who chose the dark of a cave over a house with better wiring. And a woman writing in a script no man was meant to read. The skyscrapers are not going anywhere. These worlds might be. So here is the only question that matters. Which one of them, from number 12 to number 1, would you want to see before it changes forever? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe places like these deserve to be remembered while they still breathe, subscribe, and stay with us. There are more of these vanishing worlds than you think, and less time than you would like.